Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your science teacher here, and this time I am here with a new chapter of Ncert grade 7, that is soil. Students, as you all know that soil plays a vital role sustaining life on the planet, and nearly all of the food that we consume except for what is harvested from the marine environment is grown in the earth soil. And students, the other obvious functions that the soils provide humans include fiber for paper and clothing, fuel wood production, and foundations for roads and buildings. Students, soil is a critical component of nearly every ecosystem, but it is often taken for granted, and it can be thought of as the ecosystem foundation, as soil productivity determines what an ecosystem will look like in terms of the plants and animal life it can support. Students, soil also plays a very critical role in forest to maintaining water quality and long-term site productivity, and whereas in cultivated fields, soil quality plays a significant role in crop productivity, since soil nutrient and other soil physical properties can directly impact yields. So students, in this chapter, we are going to learn and discuss about that what is soil, how it is formed, what is soil profile, what are the different types of soil that are generally found in India. And lastly, but not the least, we will discuss about how is soil eroded. So let's start. So students, the first topic of this chapter is what is soil. Students, soil is the upper surface of the earth where life thrives, and it is the basis of all agriculture that exists on earth. And students, it is generally formed from the weathering of rocks. So due to physical and chemical weathering of rocks, it comprises of minerals and gravel, microbes, insects, decaying organic matter that we sometimes also call humus, nutrients, water, and air. And students, the soil that is generally found on earth is divided into different categories on the basis of the geological composition, climate, rainfall the area receives. And students, this soil is not only formed by the physical and chemical weathering of rocks, it is sometimes also regularly removed or formed by the activities of human as well. Now students, there is a question that how is soil polluted, or we can say that what pollutes the soil. Students, generally the non-biodegradable wastes that we generally use in our everyday life, the plastic bags and the polythenes causes soil pollution. And students, not only the biodegradable waste, in fact the waste products from the industries which contain the chemicals can also affect the soil adversely. And the excess use of fertilizers and the pesticides that humans use in their fields also pollute the soil and decrease its fertility. Students, therefore, it is very necessary that before dumping anything waste into the soil, it must be treated properly. And the pesticides and fertilizers that we use in our field should be in minimum quantity. And lastly, the materials like plastics that we generally use in our everyday life should be banned, as we pollute the soil, because we pollute the soil by using them. And students, this affects the living organisms as well in the living organism present in the soil. Now students, let's understand that what is soil profile? Students, a soil profile is a vertical section of soil, as you can see here in this diagram. This one is the vertical section of soil. So we can call it as soil profile. Students, this soil profile or this vertical section of soil allows us to examine the different structure of soil. Means to say the different layers of soil that are O origin, A origin, B origin, C origin and R origin. And students, the different layers of soil can be seen easily if you dig deep through it while creating a well or while laying foundation of a building. Now students, the another important term that is necessary for all of you to understand is humus. Students, this humus is the decaying matter in the soil, like the rotten leaves, twigs, branches, the waste product of animals, etc. Now students, the second important term is weathering. Students, as I said earlier, that the soil is generally formed by the weathering of rocks, means to say by the breakdown of rocks, and that's why we call this process as weathering. Students, the rocks are generally breakdowns because of rains, flowing water, winds, temperature and climatic conditions of a place. In other words, we can say that the agents that play a very important role in breakdown of rocks or in the formation of soil are rains, flowing water, winds, temperature and climatic conditions of a place. Now students, another important term is parent rock. Students, the parent rock is the rock from which the soil is formed. So the nature of the soil is depend on the texture and the availability of the minerals present on the rock from which it is formed. So the rock from which the soil is formed is called the parent rock. Now students, let's understand the different layers of the soil. Students, the first layer of the soil is also known as A origin, that is here. This one is known as the A origin or topsoil. Students, this A origin is the topmost layer of soil that is visible to us. And students, that contains large amount of humus and minerals which makes the soil dark in color. And students, do you know why the soil in A origin is rich in nutrients? This is because the presence of humus in topsoil. Students, when you dig down the layer of the soil, then you will find that the texture of the topsoil is soft and it can also retain water very easily. And that is why the plant roots grow in the topsoil region easily. Students, as I said that in the top layer of the soil, the availability of water and oxygen is sufficient, and that is why the topsoil is a home of many living organisms as well as insects, worms, beetles, rodents and moles. Now students, the second layer of soil is B origin, or we can say the middle layer of earth that you can see here. This one over here is the B origin. Students, this B origin is the next layer of the soil, and the most important thing about B origin that it doesn't contain much humus as compared to A origin. But students, the minerals are found in B origin in large quantities. And as compared to the A origin, the layer of B origin has hard texture, light color, and more compact as compared to the topsoil. Now students, the next layer of soil is C origin or the third layer that you can see here in this image here. Students, this third layer of soil consists of small rocks with cracks in them, as you can see here in this image. And here in C origin, these rocks are partly weathered, means to say not completely broke down. Now students, the last layer of the soil is bedrock that you can see here in this image here. Students, as I said, this is the last layer of the soil. Sometimes it is also known as bedrock. And students, do you know why it is called as bedrock? Because it contains large pieces of rocks that are not weathered or exposed to any winds or water. And students, the most important thing about bedrock that it cannot be dug with the help of a spade because it is very hard in texture. Now students, let's understand that how is soil formed. Students, as we already discussed that the soil is generally formed from the weathering of the parent rock, and students, we also discussed that the texture of the soil depends on the parent rock from which it is formed. And students, this process of soil formation does not take place with an hour or in a years. In fact, this process takes time, maybe 100 years, and then finally the fine soil is formed. Students, in the first stage of soil formation, the soil is generally non-porous in nature. Then it slowly turns into soil by the two agents that are air and water. So students, in a short, we can define soil as a mixture of rock particles and humus. And students, then on the basis of the size of the particles and the texture of the soil, it can be divided into various types. Now students, as we discussed in the earlier slide, that based on the size of the particles and the texture of the soil can be divided into different types. So the first one is sandy soil. Students, this sandy soil has big particles as compared to other types of soil. And students, due to these large spaces between these particles, the air can easily fill within it, and hence sandy soils are called well aerated soil. Means to say a soil that has sufficient amount of air in it. Students, the next advantage of these big particles is that the water can easily penetrate through these particles of sand, and that's why the sandy soils. But students, there is a disadvantage also of these big particles because it cannot hold water due to these large spaces between these particles. And that's why we can say that sandy soils are light and aerated but dry in nature. And so, because it is dry in nature, sandy soils lack much nutrients and hence do not support the diverse growth of plants. Now students, the next type of soil is clay soil. Students, this clay soil consists of fine particles which have less space between them. Students, as there is not much space between the particles of the clay soil, it is not well aerated like sandy soils. But students, the tiny gaps between the particles of clay soils allow the absorption of water in the soil easily. And that's why, due to the tiny gaps between the particles, the clay soils are able to hold water, and hence it is suitable for the growth of different kind of plants. Now students, the next kind of soil is loamy soil. Students, this loamy soil contains a similar amount of large and small particles in them. Means to say, it contains both the amount of large and small particles in equal proportion. Or we can say that the loamy soil is a combination of sandy, clay and silty soil. Now, the next important fact about loamy soil, that it also contains humus. And students, as I said, that this loamy soils contains the large and the small particles in equal proportion, so it can hold water in appropriate amounts, and therefore it supports the growth of plants. Students, as it supports the growth of plants, so it is also known as agricultural soils because of their fertility and appropriate texture. The next important fact about loamy soil, that it contains good amount of calcium and have a high pH level as compared to other types of soil. Now students, the next kind of soil is silt soil. Students, these silt soil particles are much smaller as compared to sandy soils, but larger as compared to clay soils. And students, this silt soil can hold water to some extent because of its fine quality, and it is generally found near the water bodies like river banks and lakes. And students, as compared to other types of soil, this silt soil are rich in nutrients, and that's why it is very highly fertile and hence are suitable for agriculture. And students, the most amazing fact about silt soil, that due to its high fertility rate, it can often mix with other types of soil in order to improve their fertility. Now students, let's learn and understand the different properties of soil. As the first one is percolation of water through the soil. Students, this percolation means the property of soil by which it allows the flow of water through it. And students, this percolation property is different in different kind of soil. And as we discussed earlier, why it is so? Because due to the different sizes of particles of different type of soil, and so the percolation rate in different kind of soil. As some soil absorb water while others allow it to flow through them. And students, you can check or calculate the percolation rate of any kind of soil by the help of this formula, that is over here. Now students, the second property of soil is moisture. Students, moisture is the amount of water that is present in the soil. And students, in fact, even a dry soil has also some amount of moisture in the air. And students, as we discussed earlier, that the particles of the clay soils are so fine, and that's why the water holding capacity of clay soil is maximum, and that's why it also has the highest content of moisture in it. Now students, here is a question that why the air over the farmland appears shimmering during the daytime. Students, as we discussed that the soil contains water, so due to sunlight the water from the soil begins to evaporate and then it turns into water vapor. And students, when this water vapor reflects the sunlight, then it appears as it is shining, and hence the air over the farmland appears shimmering during the daytimes. Now students, the next property of soil is absorption. Students, the different kind of soil has a water absorption capacity, which depends upon how porous the soil is. As you all know that due to the fine particles of the clay and the loamy soils, as you all know that the clay and the loamy soils are most porous due to the fine particles of their soil, and hence these kind of soil, means to say clay and loamy, can hold the water in large quantities. That is why crops can grow over these soil. But the sandy soils on the other hand do not absorb water and hence do not support much vegetation. Now students, the next property of soil is texture. Students, this texture of the soil means the size of the particles of the soil. And students, you already know that the different kind of soils have different textures due to different size of their soil particles. Now students, the another property of soil is color. Students, different soils have different colors as well. And students, do you know why? Students, this is just because due to the different kind of minerals and the different kind of nutrients present in the soil. Students, have you ever observed the black color of the soil is because of the presence of the humus and the minerals, while some soils are red in color because they have high amount of iron in them. That's make it to look red. In the same way, the different soils have different colors due to the presence of the different kind of minerals in them. Now, the another property of soil is pH. Students, this pH of soils is depend upon their acidic, basic or neutral nature. And so, based upon the pH, the different types of crops grown in different soil. Now students, the next property is air content. Students, as we discussed earlier that soil is made up of particles of different sizes, and due to these particles the soil can be loosely bound or tightly bound. So the air often occupies the space in between these particles. And students, due to the air between these particles, it allows the life to sustain in the soil, such as for microorganisms. Now students, the next topic of this chapter is crops and its relation to different types of soil. Students, the crops grown in any region is depend on the climatic factor and the different types of soil component of that area. So, on the basis of the climatic factor and on the components of the soil, different kind of crops grown in different kind of soil. As the first one, clay soil and loamy soil. Students, as we discussed earlier that the water holding capacity and the air holding capacity in clay soil and loamy soil is sufficient as compared to other types of soil. And that's why these types of soil, means to say the clay and the loamy soils, are good for growing cereals like wheat and gram. Students, secondly, the clay soils are rich in organic matter, whereas have good capacity to retain water. And that's why it is suitable for growing paddy and wheat. Students, nextly, the loamy soils have high draining capacity and also have the capacity to hold plenty of water, and that's why loamy soil is good for growing lentils like masoor and other pulses and cotton as well. Now students, the last topic of this chapter is soil erosion. Or what is soil erosion? Students, soil erosion means the removal of the top layer of the soil. And students, do you know how it has happened? Students, the soil erosion mainly occurs when the soil is left loose without vegetation or when the deforestation occurs. And students, when there is no vegetation in order to hold the soil, then in that situation the strong winds and the flowing water or rainwater takes away the top layer of the soil, and therefore it results in decrease the quality of soil, or we can say the fertility of soil. And students, not only this, in fact it also kills the organism living inside the soil. So we should plant more and more trees, because the roots of the plant and the trees keep the soil together and allow several kinds of microorganisms to grow and survive there in the soil. Now students, that's all about your chapter number 9, and with this topic here, your chapter number 9 is completed. Now I will be come back soon with another chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe and stay healthy.